of Health Equity. We're going to have a presentation this evening titled, Do I Say Yes or No to Research Participation? Followed by a panel discussion with some members of the Men's Health Council of Durham County. You can go to the next slide. So here's our agenda for this evening. We'll go ahead and get started with some introductions, followed by a research presentation from our own Dr. Moore, with a quick panel discussion from two members of the Men's Health Council, and we'll end it up with a Q&A session and also provide you with some quick resources and information on upcoming events. Next slide. So here at DCI's Office of Health Equity, our vision is to excel as the leader in reducing cancer disparities through authentic community engagement and partnerships, the delivery of seamless cancer care, and the provision of outstanding and innovative research and resources to achieve optimal health in a changing and diverse environment. Our mission is to reduce cancer disparities and promote health equity within DCI's catchment area through strategic initiatives and integrate the following core areas, and those are community outreach and engagement, community-facing patient navigation services, health disparities education, and clinical trials education and workplace diversity. Next slide. So we're going to have Joyce Page introduce the Men's Health Council of Durham County and provide a little bit of information.
Thank you so very much. I'm delighted to do this. The Men's Health Council started in 2015. A group of volunteer men came together for the purpose of discovering ways that we could get more African American men involved in health promotion, healthy living activities at Durham County Department of Public Health. I realized that the sessions that I offered, healthy living, workshops, forums, most of the people who attended were women. And we needed men involved. And the best way to find out if men would get involved was to ask men, what can I do here? How can I get other men to join me? So I got together a group of volunteer men. The first man to volunteer was James Tabron. James Tabron is on the program today, and you'll hear from him. And then soon after, Earl Chestnut joined, and his father, and many others. So we're a group of about 35 persons. 32 of those persons are African American men, and they are now not just advising me on how to get other men involved in health promotion activities and research activities. They are involved in conducting, and you'll see this on the screen, monthly community walks at Durham Parks and Recreation Centers, health forums and presentations by experts. They are held at least quarterly, sometimes more often, and they are trained to be lay leaders of healthy living, evidence-based programs. And we surely would like for you all to get involved in the Men's Health Council. It is a group of volunteers. It's open to anyone in the community. It's open to everyone. And it's a wonderful way of carrying out our vision. And you see the vision on the screen, which is to reduce health disparities by engaging men in our communities who have the greatest health inequities. And we know that African American men have the greatest health inequities, and they have the shortest lifespan. And we know we can do something about that. Thank you so much. And I'll ask that we go to the next slide. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Joyce, for that introduction of the Men's Health Council. If you guys need more information on that, please feel free to drop something down in the chat and we'll reach back out to you. So now we will have a presentation from Dr. Angelo Moore. Dr. Moore received his BSN from Winston-Salem State University, his MSN from Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences, and PhD from UNC Chapel Hill. He served 25 years in the U.S. Army and retired as a lieutenant colonel. He has over 26 years of nursing experience in medical, surgical, critical care, and primary care nursing as a family nurse practitioner. He is a board-certified nurse executive and has conducted several research studies. Dr. Moore has served on multiple institutional review boards that evaluate human protections and approve research studies. So welcome, Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Aaliyah. Appreciate that. And I am also a member of the Men's Health Council. So this is a great event that we're doing for our community. So today, the presentation I titled, Do I Say Yes or No to Research Participation? And my goal is to give individuals a broad overview of research, kind of how things go, so they can be informed in making a decision to participate in research studies. And so the objectives that I'm going to cover, I'm going to define research, talk a little bit about the process and some of the methods. I'm not going to be too technical, but I just have some terms in there so people get familiar with that. Talk about the protections that we have in place for research. Talk about clinical trials, the importance of diversity. And we're going to have some questions that each individual should ask before they decide to participate in a research study. And then at the end, we'll have a panel with a couple of men from the Men's Health Council telling you about their experience in research. So what is research? We have all of these big definitions, but I want to break it down to something that's very simple for people to understand. It's a systematic process of discovering new knowledge or lead to a new understanding of something that was not previously known. And we also want to contribute to generalizable knowledge. So not just information for a particular group of people, but we want to be generalized amongst multiple populations, which is very critical. And so the purpose of research is to find out what is known, what is not known, or develop ways on how we can improve outcomes. And when we look at research, we look at three different ways of how we view it. We have explanatory research. So we just try to gain a better understanding of something. Then we have descriptive, and that focuses on the how and what. And then we have explanatory, and it deals with the why. So all of these things, you may have multiple types of these components within a research study, but this is the purpose of research. And so research is broken down into two different types. You have basic research, which is not necessarily, people may not necessarily know about it, but basic research is to expand knowledge. It's to find out the why, the what, and the how. You may not have a lot of humans interacted in it. Some people, basic research, you have what we call bench scientists, they're in the laboratory. But basic research is really not meant for commercial objectives, but it's to study things. And then we have applied research. Applied research is we use that knowledge from basic research to apply it to everyday practice to solve problems and specific questions. And so a great way of looking at the difference between the two of these is when we look at COVID, years and years of research have been done to study the virus, to study messenger RNA, to study how do we develop something into a vaccine to fight something. And then applied research, we use all that knowledge that we have from all of these years and we apply it to develop a vaccine to what we have today. So that tells you a little bit of the difference between those two. So applied research is more of commercialization of a product based on information that's been done in basic research. So this is the research process, and a lot of people may not necessarily be aware, but there's a process that follows when you develop in research. So the first thing you want to do, or research is going to do, they're going to identify a problem. If there's not a problem, there's no need of studying it. So it has to be a problem. And then you do a search of the literature to see what has been done out there. And based on what's been done or not done, you find out what are the gaps. And so your research study is going to fill some particular gaps. And so you develop some research questions or you develop some hypotheses. And then you choose a study design, which is how actually you're going to carry out this particular study. And then decide on a sampling design. And so I will stop right there because when individuals are writing grants, they're going through this entire process being very meticulous on how they're going to do things, what populations are going to reach out to, And there's a reason why you're going to reach out to certain populations, how many people you need in that particular study. So all those things are written up into a grant that goes to an organization that's going to make a decision whether or not they're going to fund it. And it's being looked at scientifically to make sure it's scientifically safe and it's feasible. And then once that study is approved, then you go and you start collecting the data, and then you have to analyze the data, and then you should write a report. And we call this dissemination. So you can write a report, or you could present the results at a conference or in front of a group of people. But we always want to make sure that if you have a study and you collecting data with the population, that you go back to that population and tell them what the results of that study were. And so research methods, we have what we call qualitative research and quantitative research. And I know that you may not necessarily be familiar with these particular terms, but qualitative research is when a research is being conducted and they ask you to participate in an interview. They want to interview you to find out how you feel about something. Or it may be a focus group. You may be in a group of people. Ethnography is when a researcher goes in and are just around the people, they observing and they're collecting data. You may do a case study or you may do a literature review, but this is what we call qualitative research, where an intervention is not involved at all. You just kind of describe what's going on. And then you have quantitative research, and we like to, people say quantitative research, you're looking at numbers. There's something to measure there. So you may develop or you may participate by doing a survey. You may be in somebody else may have done a study and they have collected data, and then you use some of that data to answer a different research question. That's what we call secondary data analysis. Whereas you don't collect the information somebody else collected, but you use information from that particular study to answer some questions. You have observational research, you have experiments, and that's what a lot of people are really accustomed to, is having experiments, developing interventions. And now you have those two are the main types of research methods, but then what you have what we call mixed methods. So you have a combination of both. And so you can write in the survey, they may tell you on a scale from 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with the care that you received? And you may say it's a 3. Somebody else may say it's an 8. The qualitative aspect is you go back and say, well, tell me why you scored it a 3 or why you scored it a 9. So that's really to get into the information on the why someone feels a certain way. Because not everything that goes on in research you're able to measure with numbers, but qualitative goes more towards the lived experience. People have these lived experience and you want to get to the root of how they feel. Also, a lot of qualitative researchers, they use information from their studies to actually develop surveys that can be used, that they can do quantitative research later on. So both of those things are important. Biospecimen, that's not a research method, but I want to put this in here to let you know that you can be involved in research where you provide some blood or some tissues or some fluids that researchers can use. When we talked about the basic research, they can use this material to conduct research. And so who benefits from research? Everybody benefits from research. If you want any type of medication, you have benefited from research. But your family members could benefit from it, your friends can benefit from it, future generations. And sometimes when you're in a research project or in a trial, you may not necessarily personally benefit from it, but others behind you may benefit from it. So some people get involved in research studies to help the next generation. Who can participate in research? I would say almost everybody, because each research study has different criteria on who can be involved in that study and who cannot, but it's totally voluntary. And that's what I try to emphasize when I talk to people when they have questions about research. It's totally voluntary. You can stop at any time, and it does not change the way they treat you. Some people are afraid that if they get in the study, they cannot stop, even if they want to change their mind, because they feel like they may be treated differently. And so we have things in place to make sure that it's totally voluntary. And informed consent is one of those big things. It's like one of those things you need permission in order to be in a study. And so a lot of people equate an informed consent with a form, because sometimes we have short forms, sometimes they have long forms, and it can be really difficult for people to understand. And so I tell people informed consent actually is a process. It's not a form, it's a process. But we have to have things in writing, and you have to sign it and agree that you have agreed to participate in it. And so we talked about the informed consent. You know, like I said, it's a process. And so it matters what the reading level is of that informed consent, because sometimes informed consents are very technical. They have large words people can't understand. And so it's really important to know that people understand what they're agreeing to. Language is important. Um, when you talk about informed consent, if English is not your first language, you need to be able to have a language that you can understand. So it should be translated in Spanish. And there's other translations for other languages that we need as well. However, Spanish is the most common second language that we have, but consent forms need to be translated in Spanish, and they need to be culturally appropriate as well. Like I said, informed consent is a process. And so just because you have it translated in Spanish doesn't mean that that person understands it. So you want to make sure that someone is there to explain it to them. It tells you about what is the purpose of the study. So there's certain things in the consent form that has to be there. It tells you the purpose of the study. It tells you what the roles are, what you're going to be volunteering for, what's going to be responsibilities of people in the research team. It should tell you about the benefits, if any, from that research study, as well as the risks. Like if you're doing people may say, well, I'm just going to fill out a questionnaire. There's no risk involved. There is a little bit of risk, because you could be asked some questions that may trigger, some things that happened in your past. So those are important. The informed consent should also tell you what your rights are as a patient or as a participant in that particular study. And you want to make sure that a person is given enough time to read the consent form, to ask questions, and to understand it so they can make an informed decision. Sometimes people are approached to be involved in a research study, and they say, okay, I need you to sign here. But no, you have a right as a person who wants to participate in a research study to say, can you give me a copy of that consent form? Can I go home and read it, so I can get a better understanding, and then I'll come back and make a decision. So you have the right to ask for a copy of the consent form so that you can know everything that's in that particular document, so you can ask adequate questions. It should have contact information for the person that's on the study if something goes wrong or if you have additional questions. Like I said, permission, by you signing, giving them permission for you to be in this study. And so as a researcher, I need to know that I am able to show someone who's going to evaluate my study to make sure that this person agreed to be in this study. And so it's permission to be in this study. So you need to, in order for you to grant your permission to be in the study, you need to make sure that you have the ability to make an informed decision. And it's constant communication. That's why that contact information is so important in a consent form, so you can go back and ask additional questions to clarify what questions you may have. And so the federal government, the Health and Human Services Office of Human Research Protections put in laws to make sure that we protect humans. And it's the 45 CFR 46. And so we call it, there's different subparts in there, but the focus and the purpose of this document and these laws is to make sure that we protect humans that are participating in studies. And so there are different subparts. Subpart A, which is what's known as the common rule, that tells you what things that need to be put in place to make sure we protect individuals that's participating in research. And then we have subpart B, C, D, and E. In subpart B, these are certain populations that there's additional protections to make sure that we protect them. So pregnant women and the fetus. So, the fetus cannot make a decision whether or not they're going to be involved in a research study. And so that's why we have that section there. We have prisoners. These are individuals that's part of vulnerable populations. And we want to make sure that these individuals not taken advantage of just because they are away from society. And children, subpart D, we need to make sure that there are certain protections that's in place to protect children, because children may not necessarily, they're not able to just give their consent. They're not old enough, so you have to have their parents involved in that decision process as well. And then you have subpart E, and that requires every institution that is involved in research to have an institutional review board, that all research projects are going to be interviewed by this particular committee. And so the institutional review board is mandated to protect humans. In this particular board, you have a different makeup of individuals. You have scientists, because you need to have that technical knowledge. You also have healthcare providers. You may have clergy or ministers that's part of this committee. You may have patient advocates. You may have lawyers. So it could be a mixture of people that's on that committee, because you want to be able to see things from a different perspective. And so what they do is they review a protocol. So they review the protocol. They're looking at all the different aspects and steps of this study to make sure that the study is going to be feasible, make sure that we're not going to have more people subjected to the research that don't need to be. We want to make sure that there's protections in place, that if something goes wrong, that there's a process for that participant to contact somebody. So all those things are in there, looking at it for safety reasons, making sure everything is legal. We're not taking away somebody's rights. Like I said, and before a research study can be done, it has to be approved by this committee, as well as any changes. If any changes that has to occur, it has to be approved before they can make a change in their research study. So what is a clinical trial? A clinical trial is a research study that tests new methods of screening, preventing, diagnosis, treating a disease. And so there's different types of clinical trials based on what I indicated. Prevention, you're looking at a disease risk and ways to reduce that risk. Looking at screening trials, testing new ways on how to find diseases earlier. Treatment trials, you want to test new drugs or new treatment methods. And quality of life trials, supportive care. So you want to help individuals be comforted, during the process of their disease. And there are phases in the clinical trial. And so the first phase is the preclinical phase. So these things happen in the laboratory. Remember earlier when I talk about the biospecimens that people are able to participate in research studies? So that's where this comes really in place. And so a lot of studies are done on animals before we can have those studies done on humans. And so we have what we call IACUC, which is the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, where they protect the rights of the animal as well, to make sure that animals receive something for pain, that they're being treated part of a study where they're not being abused. And normally, almost every one of these committees have a veterinarian that's on that committee. So I've sat on that committee as well. And then you have the 4 phases of the clinical trial. So you have phase 1, and this study is done with a small group of people. And you're looking at determining what is the correct, if you have a medication, what is the correct dose that we should be utilizing. And then if that phase goes well, then you go to phase 2, where you actually able to add more people to that study, and you looking for the efficacy and the safety of that particular medication, as well as looking at side effects that people experience. And then if everything goes well with phase 2, and then you're able to go to phase 3 of that clinical trial, and you have more people, and you're also looking at efficacy and more side effects that people may have. And then you have the last stage, which is phase 4. And this phase may last for a long period of time because you're tracking effects and efficacy and safety over long periods of time. So those are the clinical phases. And so this, I don't want to confuse anybody, but I just want to show you the different phases, how things happen, and then if you have accelerated development, things happen much quicker. And so as you can see, the preclinical phase, when you're doing the study on animals till you get to the humans, and that process goes along. And so like phase 1, you may start out with, let's say, 100 patients, like I said, 20 to maybe 100 patients, maybe that's a little high. But let's say out of the studies, 70% of those studies actually are successful and they go to phase 2. Once you get to phase 2, now you're only around 33%. So just because you're in a phase 1 clinical trial, it may not be good outcomes. And so they will stop the study. We have processes in place to make sure that individuals are protected at all times. And so if the study is good, we have good efficacy, you move to the next phase. But as you go down to different phases, by the end, only 20 to 30% of all clinical trials that start out will actually reach phase 3. And that's just an example. And so I have this slide in there just to show you, we talked about the different phases, and this is the normal traditional way things happen. With COVID-19, we had an outbreak, so this was sped up. So you can see down here, we still went through those phases, but it was much quicker because we had done a lot of basic research in the past. And so there's some myths around clinical trials. One myth is people on a study might get a placebo or a sugar pill instead of a regular treatment. But what I can say is when it comes to clinical cancer clinical trials, is very rarely a placebo is used. So an individual will get the standard of care or a new treatment. Some study participants feel that they don't have options, and no, clinical trials is just another option that people are available for multiple stages of cancer and individuals that's without cancer as well. Another myth is you join the study, you cannot leave. And we talked about this before. It's always voluntary. You can leave the study at any time. And so there are some benefits of being in a clinical trial, and a lot of people may not be aware of that. But being in a clinical trial, you get access to new treatments that are not available to other individuals. And because you're in a clinical trial, you're going to get extra attention and protection because we have all these things in place. These scientists, these providers, these researchers that's on these studies, they want their study to go well. So they're going to make sure they see you more often. And like I indicated before, you will at least have the standard of care. You won't get a placebo. In some studies, individuals that participate in clinical trials, sometimes you have this study will work better than usual treatment. And so you'll be the first one to benefit from these new treatments, as well as you get the opportunity to help people in the future. And sometimes, depends on the clinical trial, you may get your care for free or at very low cost. There are some risks that's associated with clinical trials. Like I said, it's a new treatment, and sometimes we have side effects that not necessarily be expected, and that's part of the clinical trial is when people have side effects, you get to write those things down to educate everybody else on these are potential side effects that you may have. In some tests, you may have to come in more often. That could be a good thing. Like I said, you get more treatment, you get more attention, but at the same time, it could be too much a burden for you to come in so often. So that could be a negative effect from being in a clinical trial. And there's no guarantee that this new treatment is going to work. And And then health insurance, most health insurance cover clinical trials, but there may be some things that's required that may not necessarily be covered by your health insurance. But there are a lot of programs that's out there that will cover additional costs for things. And so it's really important to make sure that we have representation of people from all backgrounds, because multiple people have different diseases and illnesses. So your sex matters, your race, your origin, your age, your weight, genetics, all these things are important because you may respond to medications differently. And you may respond to treatment differently. So if we don't have enough diversity in people that's in clinical trials, we don't know if that medication works for one population but doesn't work for another population. When it comes to medications and treatments, if we don't have a diverse population of people, everybody's not represented, we don't know if that is a relevant study, and people will not trust the science. And so it's really important to make sure we have a diverse group of people. All individuals are represented in studies, unless you have a particular study that's for a specific population that have a specific problem. And so I just want to use COVID-19 clinical trial as an example. You have researchers all over the world working on this vaccine. And, Moderna vaccine was slowed, if you recall, during the process. It made, headline news, and it was stalled because they didn't have enough representation of all populations. And there was reasons why you didn't have a lot of the underserved, historically marginalized populations, because we know medical mistrust is very prevalent. We know because it became so politicalized, and then individuals didn't trust whether or not I want to take this vaccine. Some people, they want to get the vaccine, but they don't want to be in a group that don't get the vaccine itself, and they get a placebo. And so here you can see in this graph, here on the left side gives you the average, the percentage of our population. So approximately 74% of our population is white. In the Pfizer vaccine trial, they had 82%. So there was much more white individuals in this particular study. Moderna had about 80%. So what we want in clinical trials, it should mirror the population. And you look at the Black and African American population, we're about 12%, yet only about a little less than 10% was in the studies. Now, this is after everything completed. So early on, the Moderna, the African American and the Latino population was very small. So they stopped recruiting the white participants for the study so that the minority population could catch up. And so, like I said, this is really important that we have everybody enrolled in study. And overall, when it comes to African Americans, they represent only about 5% of studies. And when you look at breast and prostate cancer, we make the majority of the people that have the disease, yet we're not representing the study. So it's really important that we have the adequate representation. And recruitment is important. The federal government has put multiple things in place to make sure that we have adequate representation of populations, and you can see over the years, they have put more and more things together to make sure that's done. Like I said, you got 13% of the population, yet only 5% are African American. When it comes to Hispanics, it's 70% of the population, but only 1% in clinical studies. And I was in the NIH meeting today, and they're really reviewing grants that come in to make sure that they have things in place that make sure that all groups are represented. And as of January 2019, a lot of people excluded from studies. So now you have to give justification on why you exclude a certain population from studies. We talked about, mistrust. Mistrust, there are plenty of reasons why we have mistrust. We know that we have a history when it comes to academic institutions, and scientists. We know that, some people feel that if they sign informed consent, they're relinquishing their protection rights. Some people feel that they are a guinea pig if they're in a research study, And as I showed you, there are a lot of protections in place to make sure that doesn't happen. And you know, a lot of people like to go back to, okay, it's a Tuskegee study, but no, there was a lot of studies that happened that where people have a negative view of research. So we have to be aware of those things. This is where we want to go. We want to have research where we have a diverse population of people, everybody is represented. And so these are some questions you should ask. If somebody asks you to be in a research study, you want to ask, why is the research being done? Why are you being asked to volunteer? These are all good questions to ask the research team that approach you. You know, what do you have to do in order to participate? You want to make sure that you're able to do what they ask you to do in that particular study. Because if it requires you to come once a week, and if you're not able to do that, then nobody benefits from it. So you want to make sure you understand. You want to make sure you understand how much of your time is required to participate. You want to know what the risks are. You want to ask them, how are you going to protect my privacy and my confidentiality? That should be in the informed consent form, but you want to make sure that you ask those questions. Is there any cost associated in participating? You want to ask that. You know, sometimes people are compensated as well, and you can ask, is there any compensation for being in this study? All those things should be clear to you when someone approaches you to be involved in a research study. And then you always need to make sure that you have a person to contact in case there are questions. So just to summarize some key points, you know, we have protections in place for everybody to participate. We have the informed consent is a process, not a form. You know, participation is always voluntary. You can participate in research as a participant. You could be an advocate. You know, you could be a member of the IRB or advisory board, and you could just learn about research and educate yourself about research and tell somebody else about it. Research is needed to improve and to have better outcomes. That's how we advance, is by using research. And we need to have adequate representation of all populations. So at this point, here are some resources. If you would like to have more information about clinical trials, we can give you copies of this presentation at the end. So there's a plethora of information that you can learn about clinical trials. And now I'll turn it back over to Aaliyah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moore. That was a wonderful presentation. I feel like I learned so much already. But right now we will have our panel discussion with two members of the Men's Health Council of Durham County. Our first panelist is Mr. James Tabron, who is currently serving as an independent consultant for housing and economic development. He received his Bachelor of Arts degree from Morgan State University and has 2 master's degrees, one in city planning from the University of Pennsylvania and a master's in social work from Howard University. He was honorably discharged from the United States Army, where he served as a captain, and he has extensive experience in housing programs and economic development, serving several roles as executive director. He serves on many city, county, and community boards, such as the Public Housing Authorities Directors Association, Carolinas Council of Housing, Redevelopment and Codes Officials, Durham County Homeless Shelter for Hope, and United Way of Greater Durham. And also with us is Mr. Earl Chestnut, who is a longtime community activist in the Durham community. An alum of Hillside High School, Earl has dedicated his life to coaching and mentoring youth. With an undergraduate degree from North Carolina A&T University, a graduate degree in sports administration from Ohio State, he has over 40 years of experience as an athletic coach and recently retired from the UNC Health System with over 30 years of service. Mr. Chestnut's dedication to the Durham County community is evident in his commitment to various community organizations. He has served as an executive committee member of the Lisa P. Angels Partners Against Diabetes, a nonprofit actually started by his family for over 8 years. Through this organization, he was invited to join the Men's Health Council, as well as the Men of Vision and Together for Resilient Youth organization. So I'm going to start with our first question for this evening, which is, what type of research study have you all participated in?
I have had first of all, let me just say hello to everyone and to indicate that I am very glad to participate in this effort. I know in the very beginning of this, I had some connectivity challenges and I was jumping all over the place from telephone to laptop to what have you, but I have had the opportunity to participate in a number of studies over the years. I have participated in trials where there was a sample that I had to give each year for the doctors. And I went through this particular one at Duke University, and they were studying the effects of certain medications on body tissue. I have been involved in trials which started off more or less as a Q&A type of an activity, getting a sense of how one might feel about certain kinds of products if they were administered. I have had early on many of the same kinds of concerns as it relates to why historically a lot of people of color are just reluctant or hesitant. And when I think about what Dr. Moore said, it's not so much a desire to want to convince people to be involved in these studies as it is to want to share information, as Dr. Moore has done, to make them want to do it. The benefits in terms of ensuring that people of color are not left out. People of color have a chance and a very good opportunity to be heard. And I gotta say this, having doctors like Dr. Brown, people we can identify with, people who we feel are more sensitive to who we are as a people, really makes a difference. How people who are conducting these trials reach out is something which is very important. It is not just enough to put a flyer up on a wall and hope that people will see it, but whether you go to barbershops or beauty salons or churches or what have you, we have to share information, be committed to that so that folks will in fact want to be involved. So I'm going to pause there and yield to our brother Chestnut.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chestnut?
Can everybody hear me? First, I want to thank Dr. Moore for inviting me. I am presently participating in a study right now with Duke called Project Baseline, and this is their 4th year. I found out through Project Baseline through one of our men, council member, Devin. And Devin was serving as an internship with Joyce at the particular time in 2016. And Devin was participating in our diabetes walk. And he started talking about Project Baseline. So I was retired, 2016, I just retired. I said, okay, Devin, I'll try it. Let me try it. So he kept talking to me about some more, and I signed up for it. And I had a reaction at first, but when I got the call though, and I talked to the lady from Duke, I had like a calmness about it. She really calmed me about the research. And Duke did a very, very good job with that research. Their research right now is about how health and disease, and they're trying to combine one and doing a very comprehensive study about health and diseases. And their Project Baseline is based off I don't know if y'all remember the Farrington Project, Project, for 3 decades about heart disease and stuff like that. They didn't want the term the terminology called risk factors. Remember that? I don't know if y'all remember the Farham, if I'm recalling it from knowledge that were telling me about it. But so what Duke did, like Dr. Moore said, Duke, you'd be surprised, Duke is ahead of the curve. So when I went in there, it's a beautiful setting. I mean, the setting is gorgeous. But it's sort of like the Star Trek. You know, when you see doctors, when they put those people in the long tube and they examine you, Duke has that. They really have that. I mean, I got a complete body scan every organ in my body from that. And I'm gonna tell you the truth, and it was surprising. With that body scan, they discovered that I had a little bit of calcium deposit in one of my arteries, and this was 2016. And I would have never known that if the Duke would have discovered that. I'm not really supposed to tell you if I'm telling you anyway. So I got with my doctor, and they prescribed the medication, and then, we kind of cleared it up a little bit. But with the consent form, Duke had the 23-page consent form. It's 23 pages. I took my consent form to my doctor. We went over every page. We went over every single page. And what Dr. Moore said in there, what he said about consent form is exactly right. Because what they tell you in that form is about the board. They tell you exactly what we're going to do, what they're not going to do. They tell you exactly, precisely, exactly everything you're going to do. And you have to initiate, and you have to sign it, and you have to date it. So they send it to you, the package in the mail, but when you get there, you do the same thing again. So you do the whole 30 minutes of going over that consent form again. They go over the whole process with you one more time. So to make a long story short, so we for the whole year, Duke is with Google, Stanford University, Duke, and Berkeley is involved with this project Baseline. And Google is the head. What I'm talking about, the curve is that there's incentives involved. I have a watch here, and this watch monitors me 24/7. And all my monitoring goes to Google in California. What I do when I get up, everything I do is monitored through this watch. I have a bed sensor which monitors my sleep. It's under my bed. It's been under my bed for 3 years. It monitors me, how I sleep, how I wake up. It does different things like that. But the good thing about it, they send you a report. They send you a report. They send you a report, they print out. So everything I get is a printout. I'm reading about everything that I read. I read everything they do. They send it to me. Before, research didn't do that. They didn't give you the information. But Duke took a step and gave the information. And another thing too, at the end of each year, we have a big party. Everybody involved with the project with me, and they talk about it. How they felt about it. But the first year, I remember this particular white woman that did the project, and I hate to say this. And she said, she asked the people from Google was there, and she said, sir, is they monitoring if me and my husband doing hanky panky? And the Google guy said, no, man, we're not monitoring that. We're just monitoring your sleep. But the people really were concerned. That was really the biggest thing about the sleep monitoring, because it's underneath your bed. So it's monitoring your sleep and your movement and stuff like that. So Duke, in the second year, Duke told us about diabetes. The medication, like Dr. Moore said, your body structure is different. So what they're doing now, they're developing different type of diabetic medication for structure for people's bodies. It's not, you have one diabetic medication. If I'm 135 pounds, well, okay, you need to use the medicine for 135 pounds. If this person 200 pounds, this person might need a different type of medication. It might be light or heavy. So instead of the same thing. In the third year, they gave us DNA testing, and the DNA testing was really something else. And this is the third year. The DNA testing was your heart. They gave me my cancer, and they gave me my medicine, how my medicine broke down in my body. When I read my heart mutation, I was happy about that. I really was. And then when I read the cancer, I was really happy about that too. But Duke knew the mutation showed that I would have a heart problem with the hereditary, which it was because my mom had heart disease, and it showed that in that mutation in the DNA. So Duke is really, really ahead of the curve on a lot of things there. And one last thing before I go, when I was in there and they did the CT scan and all that, I forgot when I was a little boy, I was riding on the back of the bicycle, and I got my ankle caught in the wheel spoke, and it broke that part of it. It broke that, it broke that. So I was in a cast. So when they pulled me out the scan, the doctor said, Mr. Chester, what is that scar? Tell me about that scar on your ankle. I couldn't even remember it because it was so long ago. I like, what scar? He said, it's a scar right there on your ankle. Tell me about it. And I had to go back and tell him. I said, that's probably when I rode the bicycle, I got my foot caught in the spoke in the bicycle on a little. He said, yeah, because I'm seeing the little chip right there that didn't heal. But you might have the problem when you're older, but you might want to get it checked out. So that's the thing with the research, and I feel really comfortable about it. I have not had any. Duke made you feel really, really comfortable about it. They also the compensation is off the chart. You get quarterly reports, and you put it on your card. You get a Visa card, and they give you $10 when you do the quarterly report. I forgot every time I do my quarterly report, I get $10. So when the last time I looked at it, I had over $100, which I haven't even spent it. I mean, because they do it all the time. And then you get at the end of each year, you get your $500, and they give you that right there, and they give you that on a Visa card too. So that's the whole thing, the good thing about me. But it's not. I mean, they give you a comprehensive exam. I mean, I'm gonna say it's not. You go in there and you have your fear, your anxiety, but they calm you down because it's only you in there. They're not having everybody in there. It's only you. I'm with one person all the time, all day when I do my yearly report. And we go from each station to each station to each station, and it came out real well for me. So the thing is that what Devin did, what I like what Devin did, me and Devin was going around to different churches and stuff like that to try to recruit more minorities to take part in that program. And Devin did a good job with that. He went to churches. When George had those things, George had a lot of programs that we were doing outside stuff. Devin was there, really pushing for the minorities to join that program because, like you said, we need more minorities to really find out exactly about our health issues because we are one of we do have some serious health issues within the Black and brown community that need to be resolved, and they're looking at especially heart, cancer, and diabetes. Those three right there, those three are really very important.
Appreciate that, Earl. And I do have questions for both of you all. So if you have a person that's thinking about being involved in a research study or participating in research, what advice would you give them?
Well, the first advice is that you have to be sure you talk it over with your family members. Be sure you talk it over with your family and your friends if you have it, if your pastor if you want to, and your doctor. The doctor is very important. Talk it over with your doctor. Because I talked to it with my doctor a long time. I really did. Because I wanted to really know exactly what was being involved in it. I think what really would help me is that I was in a hospital environment for 32 years. So that sort of like really helped me out a lot that way. But if I'm telling somebody that you just have to trust and talk, and if you have a doctor, talk to your doctor, ask your doctor about it, ask somebody who's been in it. And that's what the whole process was. And that's what Devin was trying to explain to me. It's about trust. You got to trust yourself. And, then I went in there and I would trust myself. And then Duke made it comfortably. It wasn't like you walked in there like, I was comfortable the whole entire time I was in there because that was their job, to make a person comfortable, feel comfortable that you want to come back. So when I left out of there, I see you the next time. I mean, I wasn't like, I didn't leave out mad. I left out like feeling really good because I'm telling you what happened with me. It made me aware of my health because the next year when I went back, my blood pressure was down, my weight was down. It was more like okay, I'm gonna be better next year. I'm gonna do better next year. And that's what was me. So in 3 years, my blood pressure went like from 140 to 116. My weight went from 160 to 145, all that kind of stuff because it was like okay, I'm in a process here. And I want to go back and be the same thing I was before. I want to be better than what I was each year. This is the 4th year here, but they're going to give us another year because of COVID. And so I'm really kind of excited about that too. But they do a great job.
Yeah, so that study kind of held you accountable from year to year. That's great. That's a great point. And what about you, James? What advice would you give someone who's thinking about being involved in a research study?
I think it's important to know why you want to participate. There are various reasons why people may want to do it. Sometimes there are incentives, which might be a certain amount of money. As Brother Chestnut has indicated, another incentive might be this is a chance to get a good physical to find out some things about yourself that you just might not know. Another reason conceivably would be to want to do something that would add to the greater good for the larger population. So we have to ensure that, as you have pointed out, Dr. Moore, that one can be fully informed in terms of what the trial is, what are the implications of being involved, what are the potential benefits, and what are some of the risks. While I did not really elaborate on this, one of the trials that I too took at Duke, and I referenced the fact that this was over about 3 or 4 months, and they were checking the effects of medication on body tissue. And each time I went in for the trial, they actually took, and it wasn't painful, a little piece of tissue to see over time what those effects might be. So knowing that that is one of the things that might be involved in that trial versus a simpler Q&A. But my basic question would be really looking at why you want to do it and ensuring that you have the questions asked that satisfy you before you proceed.
Excellent. Leah?
All right, our next question is, what advice would you actually give the research teams in ways to approach historically underrepresented populations?
I think, if I may, it's respect is so important. Looking at person as being a being and not a thing. Looking at the fact that clearly they are coming to the table, or we sometimes have gone to the table with some preconceived ideas based on some bad experiences, but we cannot allow ourselves collectively to be held hostage to what was. We have to look at what is and the potential benefits. And talking with, as Brother Chestnut has said, our doctor, talking with people like Brother Moore, people like Miss Brown, talking with others we trust, who we feel comfortable with, and getting some sense of thoughts they may have, questions that they may cause us to want to ask and find out about. But it is important to make sure that when you go in to meet with a doctor, a practitioner, that you feel that you're given the respect that all of us are due. And if you're not getting it, the thing that I would suggest is don't stay, don't participate.
Yeah, but with Duke though, Duke gave me the utmost respect. I mean, from the receptionist to the nurses to the doctor to the entire. I mean, it was like the respect to the utmost. I mean, I think the job was to make you feel comfortable, the way they talk to you, the way they calm you down, hold your hand, you're gonna be all right. I mean, the respect was just there, and I'm really saying this about Duke because it was the truth. Duke showed you so much respect, and it was like you in the room and they talking to you, laughing about you. I mean, it's like, okay, Mr. Chestnut, we finna work on your, you got to do your breathing part. All right, Mr. Chestnut, we got to stand up, sit down for 5. I said, I can't do that. Yes, you can. You know, it's stuff like that. I mean, so you get into it, and you're there, and you really get into it. You're laughing, you're joking, and the whole 9 yards. And I came out, and I was telling people, I said, look, I had a great time. I said, Duke treated me with the utmost respect. I had a good time. They fed you lunch. They fed you dinner. I mean, they just like, you know, I was getting world-class treatment up in there. And then like, I don't know about James, but I walked out there with $500. I was like, okay, thank you. I mean, but I didn't, but James, but I'm gonna tell you the truth though, James, I didn't know I was going to get $500. I did not know that. I'm telling you,
the lady asked for mine. I don't know.
Yeah, the lady gave me the card, and I said, "What the card for?" She said, "Mr. Chester, it's $500." But on top of that, though, but you got a lot of incentives. I got watches, I got hats, I got badges, I got shirts, I got pens, pencils, I got the beautiful bags. I gave some of the bags to my sisters and my aunts. I got hats, pens. They give you a lot of stuff. I mean, so much stuff you walk out there with. And the only thing I walked out there with, and I still hate it to today, with the stew process, Brother Chapin. That stew process really bothers me. That bothers me to death. But because you have to send it off, you know, and FedEx come pick it up. But that's one process I hate.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you all shared your positive experience. And I know you probably talked to a few people who did not have a positive experience. If you think, do you know anyone who did not have a positive experience? If you could share why they didn't have a positive experience?
Well, when we met at the downtown, and it was met with like 400 or 500 people when I ended the year thing. And I say out of 500 people, I didn't really hear anybody say they had a negative. I really didn't, because they was like me. They was excited about it. They wanted to be a part of it. And I'm walking in here and I'm like, okay, all these people took part in this research too. And they're talking the same language we're talking. They ask the same question. We cornered Google, we cornered Duke, we cornered Sanford, and everybody asked the same question. What is part A, part B, part C? And Google answered their part, Duke answered their part, Sanford answered their part, Burley answered their part, and they were very specific. Anything else that you didn't know, they got back with you. And the technology and the research, they send that to you. You get it in the email. anything that comes out, you get it in email. You know, the technology is there. They change it every year. They change it every month. Whatever's out there, they're changing it. They changing it. They give it to you. So you get knowledgeable about it. That's why I like your prostate cancer. I'm hearing about the prostate cancer a little bit more, and I'm understanding that why we have it like we have it. I'm understanding the way that our heart function and why we have the calcium deposit. You know, you talk about environment, your living status, your health, your diet, stuff like that plays a very important part in that. Why do we have different type of medication, you know, and stuff like that? So Duke is really ahead of the curve. Duke is going to be, in 20 years, we're going to be really, really in that Star Trek mode where they can say, okay, this is what you have. This is how we're going to treat it. I'm really serious about that. I mean, y'all laugh, but Duke, we're going to be in that Star Trek mode where they're going to be able to scan us and treat us. I'm serious about that.
So,
Y'all laugh about it.
so we give James, we're coming close to time. You know, do you know anyone who did not participate in clinical trial because of poor experience, or they participated and didn't have a good experience, and why?
No, I don't, Dr. Moore. If anything, people who I have talked to in the past who did not participate were based on some historical misconceptions about how it is today. I have to say that I'm not going to say that society is all that it can be. I can very comfortably say, based on my experiences, that what people of color encounter when they go to a hospital or talk to a doctor seems to be so much better than what it used to be. There's a greater feeling of comfort. You walk in and you feel that you're being accepted again as an individual who perhaps can help the doctor or the institution conduct the trial. And there are some benefits, as Brother Chestnut has pointed out, that can also be derived from participating. But no, I don't know of anyone who has gone into a trial and wish they hadn't. I've not met that person yet.
Excellent. Thank you all for your time. And, you know, I just want to let you know that there's going to be a program on the 25th of May. We're going to have a guest speaker, Dr. Yates, and he's going to be talking about how important biology is. And he's done some research to see how studying certain vitamins, you know, actually help with outcomes. And so I want to invite you to come. I think Aaliyah's going to put some information in the chat, the flyer, where you can register. We'll be glad for you to come and participate. This is just another way of learning more information about research and how, you know, studying biology actually helps us with interventions in the future. And so I want to thank you all again for attending today. If you have any questions about anything that we've said, here's our contact information, our phone number, our email address for the Office of Health Equity. We also have a website, and we just want to thank you for your time. And want you all to have a great evening. We want to make sure that we don't take too much of your time, but it was great. I want to thank, you know, Earl Chestnut, James Tabron, Joyce Page, Aaliyah Brown, Kirsten. It takes a lot of us to do this program. So I just want to publicly thank you all for all your participation and all your assistance. And you all have a great evening.
Hey, we thank you too, Dr. Moore and Ms. Brown. Thank you all.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us. You guys have a great evening.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.